All set.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Lisa Chapman with Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness with some of my colleagues and our state partners who are also colleagues. And we're really thrilled to have you join us today on the issue of our data report from 2023 and how can you use the data report for advocacy, as well as some of the themes in the data report, how we develop the data report, and just some thoughts. And then we want to hear from you as well, and how you've been doing advocacy in your local community and ways that you can further amplify some of the findings here and some of the data that you have. So thrilled to be with you. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to hear about how the report was developed, and keep in mind this is the 2023 data. Some themes, some of the campaign to end homelessness goals, collaboration, successes and challenges. We're going to talk a little bit about the housing ecosystem and homelessness experiences, racial disparities. Jerry's going to talk about using HMIS data and some of the other data from the report. We're going to talk about the difference between advocacy and lobbying and how you can use this in your exemplary advocacy that you do, hopefully all year round, and then just some resources and materials. So let's get started. So Lynn, to you.
Thanks, Lisa. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Lynn Hinges. I manage housing and homeless services at the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. And I was very fortunate to be able to kind of help with the coordination of the report this year. Wanted to give you a little bit of context as to how the 23 report was created. First and foremost, you might have remembered we sent out a survey in the summer of last year to get people's thoughts and reactions about how they've been using previous reports, what information is most valuable to them, what they would like to see in future reports, etc. So thank you to everybody who completed that survey. It really did inform some of the changes that we made in the 23 report. One of the things that we heard in that survey is the report that all people who use the report really would like to see the report be able to tell the story of what's happening in Michigan as it relates to our population of people experiencing homelessness and what our providers are doing to support them. So there are a couple of new things this year that we've added that weren't in previous years' reports. Definitely would love to hear your feedback as to what you think about those and how we can continue to tell this story. I would like to say that we can't tell the story without Micah. Micah is absolutely critical to this. Very much appreciate all of our partnership that we have with Micah, not just through their all of their advocacy, but through HMIS, because without that, there is no report. I also want to definitely thank the members of our subcommittee. We have a wonderful subcommittee of participants who spend a lot of time doing a lot of work on this, whether it's collecting the data and sharing it, writing the narratives that go with it, helping to edit the report. This is very much a collaborative process, and a lot of extra time and effort goes into it. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who was on the subcommittee, because it's definitely a labor of love in certain ways. Obviously, with all things, there's always going to be some data challenges. One of the things that I will say that we continue to wrestle with is we have an abundance of data from a lot of different sources. how do we put that all together in a cohesive way? Understanding that a lot of folks have data where the definitions are a little bit different than HUD's. And so how do we really thread the story and help people understand what the data is saying, even when things when it's not always comparing apples to apples. It's all very important data. And I would say the other thing that we, as far as the data challenges, is because we have a lot of data, we have a lot to say. How do we keep it from being a 50-page report, which is would be very easy, would be really, really easy. So again, your feedback is extremely important to us. Tell us, how we did on this one. It's always, every year is a new experience, and we are always open to feedback and ideas and suggestions. And tell us what you want to see for 2024. So thank you all very much. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Lynn. So now I'm just going to run through, a little bit about Michigan's campaign to end homelessness. And sorry, we shorthand everything into an acronym, whether it makes sense or not. So apologies, call us out, ask questions. And of course, I can't see the chat. So colleagues, let me know if there's questions in the chat. But just in terms of things that you would expect to see, we're in an extreme housing deficit. So one of the goals of the campaign is increase housing of all kinds, but especially affordable housing for those with the lowest incomes and those, people coming out of experiencing homelessness, preventing episodes of homelessness wherever possible, collaborating on every level that you can imagine, local, state, we have federal partners, national partners, legislators, elected leaders, appointed leaders, people with lived experience. Collaboration of all kinds is key to getting this work done, because this is some of the most challenging and complex work that there is. We want to improve the systems, as well as improving the equity. We know that there's a lot of inequities in the homeless response system, as well as the housing system in general. We also endeavor to use data in a lot of different ways to measure progress as a yardstick, to see how we're doing, to see where the gaps and challenges are, to see, what we did well and what we can improve on, and increase our accountability as well. So this is, a report to the community, if you will, to the state about, a snapshot of the year of 2023. And then also, of course, engaging persons with lived experience, ongoing partnerships, in all of this work as we continue to move forward. Just also want to mention that the annual data report is directly linked to the action plan. I showed you the goals of the action plan and the campaign, and also every COC, every homeless response organization and provider, we're all linked together. And some of the important information, if you ever do advocacy, is to let whoever you're advocating for and with, let them know that we're part of a large system and we all work together, at all levels, so that we are not working at cross purposes. We all have the same goals, we all have the same aims. And so that's really key, I think, to making a measurable difference. In terms of overall themes that we saw from the data report, unfortunately, there was a small increase in homelessness. That's an average statewide from 2022 to 2023 of 2%. A lot of areas saw very small increases. We also saw some really promising decreases for certain target populations, which we'll tell you about, which is really exciting. Unfortunately, we saw also, continuing themes around racial inequities in homeless response and health and housing and incomes as well. Not a surprise that we saw a strong housing need. It's no surprise that that is, a key, and homelessness is a housing problem. It's a housing issue. And so that continues to drive a lot of the challenges that we have. And also a strong demand for services, which is a good thing. And we had some successes in that arena as well in terms of funding. So in terms of themes, would these be the same themes that you would pull down, that you would point to in your region or your local area? Would they be similar or different? And, you know, how would you tell your story over the last year around some of these themes and issues? So now I'm going to turn it over to Jerry Leslie to talk about some of the data and some of the numbers that we saw. Jerry.
Hey, good, excuse me, good afternoon, everybody, and glad to have you here. So I actually want to answer a really common question that I get quite frequently, and I get this every year coming into this time. One question comes out is, why does the annual report get released so late in the year? So for instance, 2024, why are we looking at data for 2023 so late in the year? And I wanted to just give you guys a little bit of inside picture as to why we do this and why this happens the way it does. One of the big things about the annual report is in order or before we are able to actually pull the data, we have to wait until the federal reporting period. So this is the period in which all of our communities across the state have to submit data to HUD for purposes of federal reporting. And this is something that communities are monitored on, of course, and it figures into their scoring for their NOFO application, which is basically the big HUD funding application that every community does. We essentially, the key thing about it is we have to wait until the end of the point in time count or the PIT count when data is submitted in usually middle to end of April. And then by the time our COCs in Michigan get a chance to go ahead and move around all the structure of the data in the system to close out the PIT process, that's the process that we have to wait till that completes before we're actually able to pull data. So we aren't usually able to begin pulling the data for the previous year until we get into May and right around the 1st of June every year. So I wanted to give that as a little bit of a background information piece for you all to be aware of, so you know what's going on. And once we get that, the committee goes to work and hard at work and doing the work that we do. So as Lisa said, a 2% increase. It was actually about a 1.55% increase, about 1.5% between 2022 and 2023. Across the board, we saw things pretty consistent with numbers. You will see in some of the areas, some regions have lower numbers than others, just by the nature of how homeless services work within various parts of the state. But we have been pretty consistent when you look at the numbers from area to area and what we're seeing with the count. And Lisa, if you could go to the next slide. So a couple of things you're going to notice right now is that we've gone from 2020, 2021, and of course the numbers have gone up quite a bit in 2022 and 2023. But the thing to be aware of is the lower numbers in 2020 and 2021 were largely due to the fact that we were in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And as many of you are well aware, one of the things that was in place in that was the eviction moratoriums that were in place during the COVID pandemic, which means that there were fewer people entering homelessness because of the pandemic. And therefore, obviously, there were fewer people seeking services because of that. We also saw in a number of communities where family members or friends were allowing individuals to stay with them for longer lengths of time because of the pandemic itself and the sheltering in place. So that was another factor that did affect services during the pandemic. So what we look at is when we look at the numbers that have come back up after that, they've really come back up to around the same range that the numbers were before the pandemic hit. And one of the things that I think is rather notable is we have not grown as quickly as the rest of the country. Many of you may have seen that the numbers for the PIT for the last couple of years have been released, and HUD recently released the numbers, and they reported on the PIT increase. And of course, comparing our annual count to the PIT is a little bit different because there's a little bit different evaluation criteria that go into place. Number one, the PIT looks at one day, one specific night in time for counting homelessness. In Michigan, we look at all the people served throughout an entire calendar year. But in the national PIT numbers, we saw increases nationwide of about 18% in the number of people experiencing homelessness within the past year. Whereas in Michigan, our annualized count, we saw an increase of only 2%. So one thing that I would say is we're not seeing an increase in quite the same rate that the rest of the country has been seeing increases. And Lisa, go to the next slide here. And Lisa said one thing that was rather interesting, and it was a good thing. We saw that there were some actual decreases in some critical target populations. Number one, first-time homelessness decrease of people experiencing first-time homelessness decreased by 6% between 2022 and 2023. Those who are frequent users, so this is not individuals which meet the total definition of chronic homelessness, but frequent users, we describe those as individuals or households who have multiple episodes of homelessness. We saw a 10% decrease in that population. Also saw a 5% decrease in veterans. Our youth, 18 to 24, did increase slightly, but both our senior adults and then our adult population, 25 to 54, did decrease. We did see also some slight increases in certain populations of adults with children, just to be aware of that. But across the board, we were really seeing decreases in a lot of the key target demographics that we look at as far as homeless populations. Now, Lisa, go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, and one of the things I want to do, and I am going to do this really briefly, if you are interested in your own local community, pulling your own data for your region, for your COC, you can do this just like we did. The same exact reports that we use to pull this data are the reports that are available to you to do this. And I'm going to, if Lisa, if you want to, in just a moment, allow me to take the screen.
Yeah, I have to stop sharing first.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. So there is a tool that we call our HMIS data warehouse, and I'm going to go in here and I'm pulling a quote unquote anonymous COC. I won't show which COC it is, but we have, if you have access to the HMIS data warehouse, most of your system administrators, if not all of the system administrators across the state, have access to this. Also, there are a number of COCs with other members of COC leadership or evaluation staff that have access to this tool. You can go into a report called the Core Demographics Report, and you can run this by your COC code. If your data is clean, and you do a good job of making sure all your programs which are no longer participating are closed out, you could run this based on COC code. And what this is doing, and I've got a run of this going right now, this is the exact same report that we use to pull the statewide numbers that you see in the report. So you're using the exact same tool. We also have a report called the system performance measures by subpopulation that you can use to look at outcomes based on subpopulations. And it is a very useful report. But this report right here will allow you to pull your data, and you can look at the various breakdowns of all of the subpopulations, including race and ethnicity here within this report. And it will also allow you look at things such as how many individuals and persons have indefinite impairing disabilities, look at the relationship breakdowns of people who are being served, whether or not people are survivors of domestic violence, and the number of times and the length of time that people have experienced homelessness. All of this data is available to you directly on this report. And I definitely want to encourage you to take a look at this, because this is a great tool you can use to be able to pull the same data we use and then present this to your local partners and those who are involved in homeless work, as well as those who are in community leadership who may be interested in this. And Lisa, did we get a couple of questions in here? Oh, Amy typed in, core demographics report. Yes, absolutely, Amy. Core demographics report for the HMIS data warehouse and the system performance measures by subpopulations. Perfect. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thanks, Jerry. All right, let's go back to the screen share. Are you done with that part?
I am done with that part, yes.
Okay, all right, people seeing my screen again? I don't know if this is the right slide. Okay, yes. All right. Fabulous. So now we're seeing, you know, as Jerry mentioned, kind of a mixed bag with our data and our report. We had some successes and we had some challenges. So we saw increased demand for services and assistance. You know, we had more people trying to get into shelter, which is good, and affordable housing. We had more availability. We had some funding for shelter and shelter repairs, as well as services, millions of dollars in a supportive services pilot, as well as more coming down the pike. And then a lot of hundreds of units came online, which is really exciting. We also saw longer shelter stays due to people taking longer just to find housing. It's just very challenging. So rents are rising, so that's taking people longer, and so it backs up the shelter system. People aren't able to, you know, leave as quickly. The great news was the veteran homeless population numbers decreased, as Jerry indicated, and families with kids basically no increase overall. And then in terms of behind the numbers, the themes behind the numbers, we had more people reaching out for help. I think rents increased maybe in 2023, 9% or something like that. We saw people experiencing continued stress from the pandemic, you know, kind of those lingering after effects, people trying to get back on their feet, you know, continuing supply deficit in terms of housing that is decent and affordable, as well as, you know, costs rising. 41% of Michiganders struggled to afford basic needs. So poverty and rising home costs, incomes were not rising as quickly. So definitely challenges that we're seeing. In terms of housing and homelessness, some of these numbers are from 211, as well as the homelessness education data for students that experienced homelessness. So there was a 3% increase in the overall housing requests to 211, and housing was the top request, as you can imagine. 8% increase of individuals and families seeking both housing and legal aid assistance. Likely some of this was because of the evictions, perhaps. 11% unmet needs for housing related assistance requests. So when somebody calls 211 and they're not able to really get a referral that they want, maybe they're in an area that, you know, I don't know, forever doesn't have a lot of, you know, affordable housing or assisted housing, and some challenges with them not being able to match a referral with a need. So that's what that 11% represents. There was a 3% increase in financial assistance, just general financial assistance of all kinds. We already mentioned the 2% overall increase in homelessness statewide. There were small increases in 5 regions when we had the map up. The small percentage in region 3 likely is due to a data computing issue. So very, very small increases. In terms of homeless students, K through 12 grades, there was a 14% increase in homelessness in 2023, according to the McKinney-Vento liaisons. And then the length of time homelessness increased statewide as an average from 72 days to 78 days statewide.
Amy, could I put in a quick note here real quick? It'd be helpful.
Thank you.
So many times, and Amy or Lisa mentioned this earlier, that that there are slightly different definitions. So what happens is the Hearth Act put the definition of homelessness into 4 categories. Category number 1 is going to be, and I'm simplifying the definitions, of course, but I think many of you will get this. But category number 1 is people who are living in places unfit for human habitation or living in some type of sheltering environment for people who are experiencing homelessness. When we talk about this annual report, the numbers that we actually publish in here, that 30, we see the 30-some thousand across the past 4 years, it's going to be based on people who are in those category 1 definition. Category 2 is going to be people who are imminently at risk for homelessness, who are facing eviction, but may not be out of their housing yet. Category 3 is going to be individuals who meet the definition of homelessness under other federal statutes. And when Lisa was showing the McKinney-Vento liaison information, the information about students and households in school who are homeless, that definition is slightly varies because it also includes people who may be doubled up or couch surfing with family members or friends. So they may not be literally homeless according to definition category 1, but they're because they don't have the resource to have their own housing, they fit in underneath that category 3. That's one of the reasons why you may see slightly different definitions and on the different data points, because they work on slightly different definitions of what homelessness means.
No.
Thank you, Jerry. I just want to remind people to mute as well for best sound quality. So Eric, I think we're to you now.
Well, great. Thank you. Presentation so far. Hello, everybody. Glad that you're here participating in this presentation. I wanted to shift gears a little bit to get us in alignment with the title of this session, which is how to use your data. Basically to get some stuff done within the realm of advocacy. So let's start off with some grounding in advocacy. So what is the purpose of advocacy? At its basic level, advocacy is just simply building relationships. And what that entails is educating people about who you are and what you do. It's sharing information about homelessness, the kind of data that we're talking about here, and communicating about the issues that affect the people that you're serving. And we're talking about elected and appointed policymakers as those targets. That's really important to include appointed policymakers, not just elected officials. Within government, you have a lot of folks who actually can effectuate change within the realm of policymaking. But also, sometimes we don't think in terms of other people within communities who actually are significant influencers, who may never have been elected to office, who may not have worked for the county level government, et cetera. Those are people that you should be looking to build relationships with. And so when we talk about building relationships, ultimately, you want to be seen as the go-to credible source when you want to influence decisions. Okay, so they will be looking to you as somebody who is credible because they know who you are. They understand what you do. The data or information you provide to them is helpful and valid to them because you have been there on a regular basis, not just a one and done. Relationship building is ongoing communication. But we're talking about influencing decisions about a number of things, including funding. We're also talking about how do we change laws or local ordinances, but also thinking in terms of the regulatory environment and how do you have changes take place with respect to regulations. Those are all things that can be part of your advocacy work. Next slide, please. Thank you. So let's talk about the difference between advocacy versus lobbying. And this is an area where a lot of people get tripped up in the nonprofit world. that there is a fear that you cannot do advocacy. But it's really lobbying that can be a little bit more complicated. If you're doing that as a bulk of the work that you're doing, you can do lobbying. But advocacy is the bigger umbrella. Let's think of it in those terms. So with advocacy, we're looking at public support for or recommendation of a particular cause or a policy. Whether it's, general funding, or if we want a policy that's going to help end homelessness in your community. Uh, Advocacy is a strong tool for nonprofits to help advance missions and increase funding sources and solve community and societal problems, according to our friends at Board Source. But let's talk about lobbying. The distinction here is that lobbying is a specifically focused form of advocacy with the purpose of influencing legislation. So we're talking about, just giving an example, to meet with a legislator and talk with them in general terms about funding needs that your organization may have is advocacy. If you're talking about a specific piece of legislation or an appropriations bill, that becomes lobbying when you're looking at a specific piece of legislation and you're asking them to take a position on it. You can talk about that legislation. You can inform them about what it is, what the impacts may be. That's not lobbying. But when you say, Representative XYZ, we would like you to vote for this bill or against this bill, that's lobbying. But again, thinking in terms of advocacy, that is a very important activity for you as an individual and your organizations, your communities, and lobbying is completely acceptable. Okay, so let's go down to the next slide.
I mean, I can have it.
Yeah, if we can just
Yeah.
remind everybody to mute themselves. Thank you. All right, so let's talk about advocacy with the data report. This is an important step that often people are not thinking about when they look at this data. At the agency level or community level, you may be looking at your data and thinking in terms of how can you analyze that to find ways to improve your services and or identify gaps that are there, et cetera. But this data report is very important for relationship building and showing that you are credible with those policymakers. So you can take this information and send it to legislators, whether it's, and again, not just elected officials, but you can send it to appointed folks. You can send it to a city manager. You can send it to the director of community development, et cetera, et cetera. You can use as an approach to develop and build relationships. Again, that may be the entree. Have a meeting with somebody and just go through the data with them. You can highlight your region or your state, how and why they might be different, because you can look at that data and make those comparisons. But something that's really important here is, what are the stories behind the numbers? How do you humanize things? How do you make it more real for the people that you're talking to, and not just having numbers, but relate it to the impact on people? So when you think in terms of a shelter closing or opening, new housing coming online, et cetera, how's that impacting people directly? Also, describing local housing market, the availability of units and rent increases and fees, et cetera. Looking for other data points that help to reinforce some of the messages that you can take away from this data report to put it in a context for them. I'm sorry, I'm seeing that our note taker, our recording has maxed out. So sorry for the distraction, folks. You may not have seen that message, but I did. So putting a human face on it with stats, stories by engaging persons with lived experience, thinking in terms of people who may be utilizing certain services or have accessed certain programs in the past, and getting their stories. What worked for them? What were some of the problems that they faced before funding came in for a specific program? So how did they benefit from that program, so that you can make the case for increasing funding for that particular program in the future, et cetera, et cetera. And then think about, what are those local successes that you had with the funds that you have received and the programs that you've implemented, but what are those challenges that may still be remaining that can be resolved potentially through action taken by policymakers? Next slide, please. So we want to also provide you a number of resources that can help you and elevate the work that you're doing. So here's some additional data. As I said, you can pull other data in to help paint the picture, to help put some things in context from this data report that we're going through today. But don't forget about sources such as the ALICE report, which is a data report, asset limited, income constrained, employed, which is a category that is um, something most people don't think about, but the United Way of Michigan has been putting out this report on a regular basis. We'll have links available, I think somewhere. I'm not sure if we're putting them all in the chat or not. Some of these don't have the links necessarily in other slides, but that's a good one. The U.S. Census, they have a learning tool. So there's a Census Academy that can help give you some additional information on what you can access there. A lot of great info if you dig into it. The American Community Survey is also a very helpful, incredible source for you. And then when we think in terms of a couple of documents that are generated by our partner, the National Low Income Housing Coalition, the Out of Reach report and the GAP reports are both annual reports that they generate, a wealth of information that gives you a much clearer picture about the availability of housing and some of the barriers when we think in terms of what it actually costs for people to be able to access housing. And it does have information that is drilled down to the state level, which is really important for us. Next slide, please. So some other resources. There are some toolkits, MICA, you know that organization. Oh yes, us. We have a toolkit that's available. I would encourage you to take a look at that to see what kind of tools and tips are available that you might be able to pursue in your advocacy work. But also thinking in terms of the Campaign to End Homelessness and the annual data report, which we're going through right now, but also the action plan to end homelessness is important. That was something that was referenced by Lisa earlier, that this report does have a tie-in to the goals within that report, or that plan, excuse me. So take a look at that and think in terms of what can you pull from that that will help reinforce some of the advocacy work you're doing at the local level. And then lastly, again, the National Low Income Housing Coalition has some additional resources that help with advocacy specifically. They have what they call a housed toolkit and also an advocacy tool that is available to you. So I would encourage you to take a look at those if you haven't already and have those on hand because those can help to support the work that you are doing. Next slide. And so just talking about some practical advocacy opportunities for you to get out there and actually start becoming that advocate if you haven't done so yet. I know a number of you that I see here that are attending this session have been engaged in advocacy, but a lot of you may not have. So thinking in terms of things like tenant protections and the Coalition to Expand Housing Access, which is something I think Lisa will talk about a little bit later. The Legislative Action Committee that we host is a monthly meeting. It's a 1-hour drop-in meeting, basically like a lunch and learn on the first Monday of the month at noon. We encourage everyone to participate in that. There's no charge and there's no obligation to come to every meeting. But there's a lot of information that we do provide and have some opportunities then attached to that for you to get engaged in advocacy. Micah's annual Homelessness Advocacy Day. Hey, it's coming up here, folks. Get it on your calendar, March 16th, 2025. It's in person on the campus of Lansing Community College again this year. We're very excited about that. More information is available on our website and more will be following. There are Capitol Hill Day events as well that are organized at the federal level that you should be thinking about if you're not familiar with them yet. The National Low Income Housing Coalition, for example, does have a housing forum, policy forum that they host in March, and they also do put together a Capitol Hill Day event on the final day of that gathering. And the National Alliance to End Homelessness also has had an annual Capitol Hill Day event. Typically, their conference or convention is in July. Both of those you can attend even if you're not going to those particular events as registrants. You can still go for the day and participate in those. We've been very happy to be engaged as captains on those, and we will be in the upcoming year as well. So if you're interested in that, let us know. We would love to get you engaged in that work. Even if you're going to do a quick in and out, fly out early in the morning and fly home late at night. We do know there are opportunities, and we want to help support you in doing that work. But this is important. I'm saying this because Lisa says this every time she talks about advocacy. Every day is Advocacy Day. You have the opportunity to connect with people every day. It's not just a specific Capitol Hill Day event or a Homelessness Advocacy Day at the state capitol. You should, and I'm hoping will be attempting to build this into what you do on a regular basis. If you have any interest in any of the things up above, you can reach out to Lisa. There's her email address, and she can certainly give you more information so that we can try to get you engaged in some advocacy.
Thanks, Sarah. I just want to tag team on a couple of these, if you don't mind.
Oh, please.
The Coalition to Expand Housing Access is a group that we facilitate, so I neglected to put it on the slide. It is, we took a little break for the holidays and meeting again now starting tomorrow the 16th. Tomorrow the 16th? Yeah, tomorrow. Thursdays at 10 a.m. We were going every other Thursday during the legislative session. We may not do that same cadence, but generally I can add you to the email list. Eric talked about LAC as well, our Homelessness Advocacy Day coming up. Think about ways that you can participate. Think about who you might want to bring. You have folks that have lived experience. We had about 60 folks last time with lived experience, and they were a great asset to the teams and able to tell their stories and really put a fine point on, the data that we share with a personal experience. There was a great series of news articles that came out this week, four articles from Macomb's local paper around homelessness. Those are great if you can get your hands on some of those locally, share them with legislators, share them with your county execs and people who, have decision-making abilities or people that you want to advocate with. Take the opportunity when things like this come out, a report, a newsletter, our data report. It's a great way of continuing to build those relationships and saying, hey, I'm sharing this with you. It's great. Let's talk about it. And this is why we need X, Y, and Z. So it's just another way of getting in front of some of those policymakers. And I'm trying to advance the slide. Now we want to hear from all of you. People can feel free to either put it in the chat or unmute. If you have examples from local communities of ways that you've advocated using data, either your local data, the data report, some of these reports that we mentioned that are noteworthy, I will be quiet and let some of you talk. Nobody? All right, well, I gave you some examples of things that I've done. And also, if you have stories, think about if you're coming to our advocacy day, thinking about those stories of that family with 6 kids and how you had such a hard time finding housing for them because, they needed a larger unit with multiple bedrooms. And, those are the stories that are so impactful and people remember those. The Macomb article had a great story about a family who it was really heartbreaking to me, had a child that had developed, a 3-year-old that had developed an illness, and the mother was pregnant, so she couldn't go to the hospital with the child. So the dad quit his job. So that put them behind on their bills. They were in debt. They lost their home. So, luckily an agency stepped in and was able to help them with some of their debt and help them get rehoused. But, those are the stories that stick with people, stick with legislators when they're, going to vote on a bill, they'll remember that story that you told. And so that's really critical. If you can be thinking, April's a couple months away, but even start thinking about it now. Think about ways that you could talk about in a human way, put the humanity back into it, the issue of housing and homelessness. I don't know if we have any questions or people have any that they would like to ask any of the team right now. I know that I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you. I know that we talked about our endeavor continually to get the report out more quickly. I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that, or are you guys already working on it? I'm not on the committee right now, but any thoughts around that? The other thing I will offer is we have a lot of committees as well, not only just the data report, but committees, training committee, a lot of committees at the campaign level. If you're interested in getting involved in something, that's a great way to get started. We always love to have people from local COCs and local homeless response agencies to help us. Christina, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yep. Trying to
Find the button.
find too many buttons all at the same time. So let me see if I can correct this. So I can see your face, everybody's faces, or they can see mine.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. I just want to echo what you've shared, about the importance of this reports, along with everyone else within the webinar space, but also to say thank you to Lynn Henges as well for her incredible work and leadership on the 2023 report. 2024 report, the committee will be restarting again very soon. So if you're interested in being a part of that space, please feel free to reach out to Lynn. You can reach out to me. Our campaign coordinator is currently on family leave, but will be returning at the end of this month. So Amina Mohammed Saleh will also be accessible to folks if you have interest in joining this committee's work, or really any of the other committees within the campaign space, Homeless Policy Council, a lot of good work. So we all know the importance of data in many respects, but with everything that's been noted here and what's to come in 2025, it's going to be even more critical to show how valuable our work has been and continues to be, how embracing these practices and institutionalizing them within our work, including housing first, racial equity, is beyond necessary. So appreciate the push for advocacy here, and all of you in the ways that you participate in that, both locally with the state and the federal level too. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Christina.
Lisa, I do see a question.
Yeah, I was just gonna, yes.
Okay, yeah,
Linda?
Linda? Yeah.
Do you want to, I have some thoughts. So the question is, was there any data or metric that was collected that surprised you the most? So to me, it was very a pleasant surprise to see the great decrease in veteran homelessness that we had. I think it was 5%. On the flip side, a subpopulation of veterans over 65 actually increased. So that was surprising to me. Another pleasant surprise was that senior homelessness went down a little bit. That had been the #1 rising population in homelessness. So those were good surprises, I guess. What about others?
I'll jump in with one, and this isn't in the report directly, but this is in the source data of the report that we've been doing so much work. And again, so many of you have been part of all the racial equity work that's been done across the state. One thing that really has jumped out at me the last couple of years has been there have been some challenges with outcomes when we look at Native American and First Nations populations here in the state of Michigan. And even though they make up a very small percentage of the overall homeless count, some of the outcomes that we're seeing are definitely at levels below what the statewide averages are. And there are a number of efforts that are getting off the ground right now to begin to create partnerships with some of our tribes here in the state of Michigan and begin to collaborate with them about being able to understand this a little bit better and get their perspectives on how to begin to approach some of that.
Thanks, Jerry. That was an important one. Scott.
First of all, I wanted to basically point out that there's as you guys have said, was a lot of different participating partners, and basically thank you everybody that helped out, because I mean we had TV, veterans. I mean basically there's multiple sources. That's one of the reasons why it takes so long. I mean basically 5 or 6 different people are getting things together. And basically, yeah, I mean, every year we get better and better at pulling. I mean, we get more data and it becomes more comprehensive. But the one thing I do want to point out, Lisa did have this on her slide. Hopefully, people didn't misunderstand it, because there was a big increase that people had in shelters. The length of time went up, but the thing is that access to permanent housing also went up, which is a really good thing. So basically, please don't misunderstand that as a bad thing. It's a really good thing. People are staying in shelters longer, but as Jerry was pointing out, African Americans are leaving to better, higher destinations, but that was a trend statewide. A lot of our shelter clients are leaving to better, like, permanent supportive housing destinations at a higher rate than they were before. So that was like one of the best surprises I think I could point out, because it was probably one of the most underlying things, like why some people aren't coming back, is they're leaving the shelter system in a better situation than they joined it.
Thank you, Scott. That was definitely a bright spot too. It's nice to find those little nuggets of gold in the data, right? When it's telling you that, everybody's efforts are paying off. So thank you for that. Anyone else? Any other reflections?
Lisa, this is Amy from MICA. I just wanted to thank Allison for dropping in the chat both the primary link to the annual report on the, I believe, MSHDA website or Michigan Gov website. And then a little bit further down is a link to a MICA blog that also has the document. And I will be uploading to that a link to a YouTube video that'll have this presentation and the slides. So with scheduling conflicts, I understand not everybody can come, but we will push this out in multiple ways so that folks can sit with the information. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks to my colleagues. Thanks to everyone. Appreciate it. Take care and have a good rest of your day. Bye, everyone.